Good afternoon, dear colleagues in Graz. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person. There was a fire on the tracks south of Munich when I was trying to get to Graz, and unfortunately it forced me to return home. But I'm very grateful that I can present my study to you in this digital format. And I hope to meet some of you at a future conference. Today I would like to present my study that I called Every Teacher Should Be a Language Teacher for Multilingual Learners. And I conducted this study in October 2021 while the pandemic was still going on. And I looked into German secondary schools. And I wanted to understand, as the secondary schools are schools with a lot of multilingual classes, I wanted to understand what variables would influence the beliefs and the knowledge and the teaching methods, especially of teachers that are not language teachers, so content teachers, and that are in service already for a longer time, and especially in secondary state schools. Why did I want to look into especially secondary state schools and content teachers? Because I realized, having lived in England for a long time and coming back to Germany, that Germany is now an multicultural and multilingual society, which has been actually acknowledged by the government in 2021. We have a multicultural society, which I see in everyday life, but we have a very monolingual habitus in our official life, where the language that you have to communicate in is German, and that is the same for all school education. 27% of inhabitants have now a migration background, and for children that number is even higher. That is a study from Destatis in 2021, and I assume that with the current war going on in Ukraine, that this number is now even higher. Up to half of students with a multilingual background or German as an additional language need language support, which has been identified. But to be successful in education, the most important indicator is the proficiency in German. And not only the proficiency in German, especially in secondary schools, but the proficiency in the Bildungssprache, which is the academic language, which has the strongest impact on pupils' qualification at the end of the school. And that is one of the reasons why I looked into secondary schools, because being a secondary school teacher myself, or was in England, I realized how complicated language can get and how much we request from our students to be able to communicate in an academic language so that we can understand their knowledge. And this is particularly important in secondary schools that go up to their end of school qualification. However, there is an inequality towards monolingual peers through the proficiency of the academic language, because students with migration background are still disadvantaged against monolingual peers in general, because those students are more likely to be at the bottom of the educational performance scale for secondary schools, which then means that a lot of students with migration background leave school with either no or a very low qualification compared to their monolingual peers, which is a study from 2020. And as a result, for the lower educational academic language, their low academic language proficiency, this creates an inequality in opportunities in education and work for multilingual learners compared to their monolingual learners. Language plays a really important role in understanding a subject and expressing your knowledge. So as Ingrid Piller said in 2016, language in content lessons is like a tool that is used while it is still being made. So if you don't understand what the teacher says and you don't understand the terms, it's very, very difficult to understand what has been taught and also to express if you actually use that knowledge. Secondary schools I found interesting because compared to primary schools, there is so many more subjects that pupils have to master. We talk physics, chemistry, history, geography, even art and music. They're all languages that are that are subjects that are really language heavy. The languages used at schools are not only the spoken language, which multilingual learners often find very easy to express themselves in, but they also have the academic language, the subject language, the scientific language, and the register for the academic language. The problem for content teachers, so the people who have to teach their subject, is that very often 83% of teachers have no professional training in language support for the multilingual learners. They lack a knowledge how to work with those students who have a lower proficiency in German, which is a study from 2018. Most teaching methods are not adapted to the time of today, where we have got a variety of languages and language proficiencies in classrooms, and they come from the time before we had this influx of languages and cultures. But teachers are very well aware that it falls within their responsibility to make sure that students understand what they're learning and that they have a responsibility in teaching the language, and it should have a high priority, which is really positive. Teacher training very quickly in Germany is also dependent on the state. We have a federalistic educational system, and only 6 of 16 states have a compulsory module for German as a foreign language in general. For teachers that are not language teachers, there is hardly any compulsory module. So therefore, even graduate teachers go into service being unprepared to teach in those multilingual classrooms. And for in-service teachers, there is hardly any structured program in place to educate them about the teaching and the teaching methods. So I looked into the beliefs, the knowledge teachers have, and the teaching practices they use in those multilingual classrooms. Research into beliefs was especially interesting because those researches are really scarce in Germany into secondary schools. There was one research by Brandt in 2021 in Hamburg that was a qualitative study, and it showed that teachers' beliefs that language support is really important, is really important, and that often it does not include home languages. So teachers often believe that language learning is important, but it is normally reliant on the languages like French, German, etc. Home languages are seen as potential, but they are often not included. And the training in German as a second language would have a long-lasting effect on the linguistic teaching as well. Beliefs and attitudes towards multilingualism, there seems to be a connection, according to Hammer, that relates into the practices in the classroom, into the language and the lesson planning and the organization, and teachers' beliefs can directly impact onto their teaching practices. I took my inspiration from Simon Borg's research in 1990 into teacher cognition, which you can see here very clearly. It's quite really complex, and I took out um, three areas: the beliefs, the knowledge, and the classroom practice. But it shows very clearly that teaching is a very complex undertaking with a lot of influences that on a daily basis make a difference to how we teach. It started in 1990 by Simon Borg, and it was based on grammar teaching in secondary languages. So this is the simple graph that I produced, looking into beliefs, teachers' knowledge, and teachers' behavior in defined as teachers' cognition. The aim of my study was to understand which variables actually influence those beliefs, the knowledge of content teachers, and the teaching methods they use in multilingual classrooms. The methods I used, because this was conducted still during a pandemic, was a quantitative internet-based study. I used Google Forms to send out the questionnaire into mainly social media platforms to reach content teachers all over Germany. I didn't want to limit it to a certain area, because I wanted to see I wanted to have the biggest reach I can possibly have. It is a non-probability sampling method because it's a small sample, it's a small study. I could reach in total 26 content teachers have answered. I defined it into key stages 3 and 4, which in Germany is year 5 to year 10. Having said that, I have defined that because it includes all the schools in Germany: Hauptschule, Hauptrealschule, and Gymnasium. All school types. I didn't differentiate of any school type, and it was nationally. I wanted to have teachers that have more than 5 years of experience, because I wanted to see if the length of service and being removed from your teacher training makes any difference. Also seeing if there is an ongoing training happening for that topic in the schools. The questionnaire, to make it easy and fast for very busy teachers to participate, were mostly closed questions. They were multiple choice and a Likert scale. It was a limited time frame, September to October, and the study is a pilot study, so it only represents itself, and there is no claim for generalization or representation. For the analysis of the correlation, I used the SPSS statistical program, and the program I used is the Spearman's row correlation of variables. A quick look at the questionnaire, what it looked like. It had 3 parts. The first part was a demographic part, looking at what schools they were teaching at, what they think, how many children have a first or more languages at the school. That was just a guess of the teachers, where they would come from, which part of Germany, how long their teaching experience is, which subjects they teach. So that was the demographic part. The belief, I wanted to know what teachers think. Is it important to speak another language? And I didn't differentiate if it was French, German, or any other languages. I've used the Likert scale in only 4 parts, because I didn't want people to sit on the fence and say, I don't know, or a middle. I wanted to make them to make a clear decision if they agree or if they disagree. Positive experience to teach my subjects to teachers, to multilingual learners, and to also believe if they have a positive impact, and that they themselves, the teachers, have an active role in the language development of their teachers. Second third part was teaching. Do they let them use their languages? Do they prepare their lessons in a linguistically differentiated way? And do they pay attention what language they use and if their students would possibly understand that or if they would have to break it down? The last part was trying to understand what knowledge there is and what teaching techniques are used. So I gave them this. Obviously, is the English original. I've translated it all into German. Feel that they have had sufficient training. What knowledge do they know? Scaffolding? Do they know content language integrated learning? Do they know translanguaging? Or do they know any other teaching methods that are applicable to multilingual classrooms? And do they feel that they have enough training? And which parts of the training would they like to have? Now to the findings. For the descriptive analysis, in the beliefs, which was really positive, 80% of the teachers who took part agreed that they have an active role in language teaching. So that would be more than the Mercator study in 2012, but that's already 10 years ago. More than 50%, more than half, believe that multilingual learners do have a positive experience in their classroom and give to their classroom. Only 40% believe that they actually have a positive impact on their classroom, and 75% feel, so 3/4 believe that they are not sufficiently trained to teach multilingual learners. That is in line with the other two studies that I've looked at. 77% did not attend training in the last 3 years, which has to do with how training is organized in Germany. They have to actively go there, and training doesn't go into the schools. So what's the result on teaching and training? Scaffolding, translanguaging, etc. was not known by a majority of the teachers. 80% hadn't used any of those teaching methods. Other methods being used were using pictures for content, breaking it down was mentioned, adding explanation, making music together, using music. And what I found most interesting is that one person actually said shouting was a teaching method for multilingual learners. All participants expressed the desire to get more training, which is really positive, and 53% want to learn more about how to include multilingual learners into their classrooms. The correlation and the significance. So I looked into, is there a correlation between a positive belief and the length of service? So do teachers who are teaching for more than 15 years, for example, would be my hypothesis, would perhaps have a less positive belief about their multilingual learners? I did not seem to find a correlation between that. There is no statistical significance between those two variables, between that the length of service has any impact on either multilingual learners have a positive impact, or that languages are important, or that multilingual learners have a positive experience in their classroom. The second correlation I looked at is if a teacher is linguistically aware, knowing that they have to break down language in a multilingual classroom, is that correlated to a positive experience? And there was a high significance, high positive relationship, and high significance between those variables. So somebody who is linguistically aware also believes that teaching multilingual learners is a positive experience in their classroom. Does belief impact teaching? There was a high correlation and high significance between the belief that a content teacher has an active role in the language development of their students and the impact that they teach linguistically aware, and that they allow all students to use their languages in the classroom. So to summarize my correlational analysis, the length of service does not seem to influence content teachers' beliefs about multilingual learners. So that they have a positive experience, positive influence or importance of the languages. Teaching with a linguistical awareness, relates highly to the belief that teaching multilingual learners is a positive experience for the teacher, and the belief that a teacher has a role in the development of the linguistic development of the multilingual learners has actually a direct impact on how they behave in the classroom. They're allowed to use their languages, so they would use some sort of translanguaging to bridge from their home languages to German, and the teacher teaches linguistically aware. What are the conclusions and the implications for the future? The implications for the futures would be to educate content teachers that they actually play an important role in the development of their academic language of the multilingual learners. Making them aware already would have an impact on how they teach. Bringing training into schools for content teachers to gain knowledge about their really important role of developing academic language in their multilingual learners would make it easier for teachers to access this knowledge that they so desperately need to be able to teach in those multilingual and multicultural classrooms. It would make it easier to train whole schools across all subjects, not just training subject dependent. In Germany, a lot of training is either for physics, either for chemistry, either for history, but there is hardly anything that is done school-wise. And training teaching techniques and tools to support learning language and content. There is the Mercator Institute in Cologne has got a brilliant website with a lot of techniques and teaching materials. How much this website is used and known in schools is something I haven't looked into, but it would be very beneficial for teachers to have easy access to knowledge and teaching examples. So the impact and also the change for German society, if we want to improve academic language proficiency for multilingual learners, to create equal educational societal opportunities, it would mean that every teacher should be a language teacher as well for multilingual learners. The limitations of my study, I just want to emphasize, as I said before, it was a very small sample size, so there is no generalization or representation claimed. It was difficult to reach content teachers because not all states have got either Facebook or a social media website where I posted it mostly. The participation from the teachers was probably a bit lower than in non-pandemic times, and I would assume it was teachers that are already interested in the field anyway. Getting access to schools in Germany is restricted. You need the permission of the council, so that was why I had chosen to do a quantitative online study. And teachers were already quite stretched, as in any other country in the world. And there was a recent study from 2020 that already showed that the pandemic and all the lockdowns and the lack of education had negative impacts once the students came back to the classroom because of the homeschooling, because of the stress. And I'm sure that I've read in the meantime, there are more studies on this. So that all played a role into the participation of the teachers. What would be the next steps? My proposal would be to do a larger scale study into the beliefs, training and teaching knowledge and the correlation into the same field to allow for generalization across the country. As Ingrid Gogolin in her book from 2020 said, there is a call for substantially more research into the teaching practices and the qualifications of teachers who are in school already for a longer time. So that would play into this. Also a study to understand the preferences. How do teachers want to be trained? How do they see themselves as academic language support, and not just that it is German as a foreign language? And a content teacher toolkit online, like it is for Mercator, would be beneficial to get to teachers with really low boundaries. They can just log on, they could see the newest research, they could understand their role in language development, they could understand how language learning actually works, how difficult it is to understand content and language and learn that at the same time, and also obviously teaching methods on different stages so that teachers can just adapt them for their subject. And also, I've got that double, I'm very sorry. And also, obviously, it would be really interesting to find a university to realize for a larger scale research. And I am currently looking if there is a PhD opportunity for me to continue this research I've conducted. Thank you very much for your attention. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Bedankt für Ihre attention. Merci bien pour votre attention. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is claudiapiller@hotmail.com, but the conference organizers also hold my details. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, then I would love to hear from you. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I wish you a lovely day in Graz in this very sunny weather. Thank you very much for your attention.